What's good, everyone? G Berg Stacks here. I hope everyone's decolonizing their mind. I hope everyone's working on their self-esteem, healing their body, their mind, their soul, doing things like that, right? Every day work on that, right? Shower, look in the mirror, understand who you are, what you need, right? And what you want. And yeah, stop being dirty. Don't be dirty, right? Colonizers are dirty. All right, so today we're going to be talking about the new Keystones and kind of comparing them to the old damage Keystones, specifically speaking with caster champions, because we might start seeing Deathfire's touch come around to a lot of champions. It's going to be, I think, meta defining, especially for the mid lane. More so stuff like Stormraider Surge being changed or Phase Rush being taken out is going to be meta defining for the mid lane, for even some supports, specifically tank supports, right? That really use Phase Rush to make themselves useful in many matchups. And things like Arcane Comet might end up being really good because Phase Rush is kind of gone, right? So I want to let's talk about the new ones first. Before we get into that, let's talk about all the ones we're going to speak on, right? All the Keystones. Because the only thing that changed in this new season are a couple of the Keystones, but I want to talk about a few of them, right? So I want to talk about Airy, Comet, Stormraider Surge, Deathfire's Touch, Electrocute, and First Strike, right? So all of those are damage Keystones or Stormraider Surge is kind of like a utility keystone, can be damage, but it's Phase Rush was a keystone that was taken by a lot of mid laners, a lot of mages, a lot of caster champions, right? And the fact that it's gone, we got to talk about it. So first, let's get into the new ones, right? Arcane Comet isn't new, but it was significantly changed. Stormraider Surge is new. Very, very, very huge change. And then Deathfire's Touch is completely new, right? So let's talk about Stormraider Surge, get it out of the way, because then we could get into the damage Keystones, right? So Phase Rush was extremely effective in the current season, where it gave you so much safety in bad matchups because it allowed you to deal damage and then use the move speed to either to not only, dodge enemy engages or enemy slows, which can really mess up a lot of trading patterns, or it could really enable a lot of trading patterns for the enemy champion, while also allowing you to get into range and dip in and out of range to really deal damage, right? We're kind of seeing that in the current season. If you look at pro play, a lot of champions moved away from Phase Rush because not only did it get nerfed significantly, but it's just not as good, right? And now that that's gone, the big change is the fact that Stormraider Surge isn't easily applicable, right? Stormraider Surge, you now have to deal 25% of a champion's maximum health within 3 seconds in order to get the move speed, the slow resistance that you used to get with Phase Rush, which you only needed 3 instances of damage, right? Something like Cassiopeia instantly procced it, allowing for a super good trade early on, right? Somebody like Orianna could proc it pretty quickly, and the fact that her passive damage stacks up, right? She can win auto trades and do cool stuff like that and really run around people, right? But even somebody like Vladimir, or somebody like early game Nasus, somebody like Garen, you could see this Phase Rush being used to really get away from horrible early game matchups, right? You could auto Q and then not only get a decent trade, right, but then you're able to escape from a lot of champions who would want to have extended trades, as where you want to have these very quick trades. That is completely gone, right? That is going to be such a good change for mid lane, even top lane, right, versus some of these champions. It's also it's going to be, it's more meta defining that they got rid of Phase Rush than it is that they brought in Storm Raider Surge, right? But Storm Raider Surge, if you're able to proc it, it is going to be a very powerful keystone, right? So no more is it per level scaling on how much move speed you get. Now it's a flat 40% for 3 seconds, right? Phase Rush also gave the move speed and slow resistance for 3 seconds, but it was significantly lower, right? At level 1, it was like 13% as of right now. Now it's 40%. 40% is massive if you're able to use it, right? You're able to hyper extend trades if you want to, right? The slow resistance, I believe, was always 50%, right? But another big thing is the cooldown. Phase Rush was 30 seconds at level 1, scaling down to like, I think 20 or 15. We can pull it up just to be sure, right? And now it starts at 20 seconds, right? As of right now, it's 30 seconds scaling all the way down to 10 seconds, right? So the new Storm Raider Surge gives you the old cooldown of Phase Rush that you would get at level 9 or level 10, which means that every single wave you will be able to proc Storm Raider Surge. Kind of the same thing as old Phase Rush at level 1, but the difference is that depending on when you use your thing, right, it's 10-second more cooldown, which is very useful, right? So this is going to be very good on more bursty champions. We'll have to see, right, if champions are going to maybe get rid of Electrocute on some champions, like maybe Silas, maybe somebody like Fizz. They're going to really go for Storm Raider Surge because it allows them to use all of their buttons on the enemy champion and then use the Storm Raider Surge activation in order to, you know, run away, right? As opposed to maybe using some of your other abilities to run away, or it's just going to give you a better trade, right? You're going to deal all your damage and then maybe dodge a spell on your way out, waiting for your cooldowns, or get out of their range or whatever, right? So we'll have to see if champions will opt out of burst damage in favor of more survivability and more utility with Storm Raider Surge, right? Now let's talk about Arcane Comet. So Comet is basically the same. It works the same. Hit an enemy champion with an ability, and a comet will be hurled at to their location from you, right? But now the damage is increased based on the distance from you to the enemy champion, right? The damage, I believe, is changed a little bit, right? The new PBE damage is 15 to 100 based on your level, plus 5% AP and 10% of your bonus AD, right? Damage respectively based on adaptive, right? If you're AD or AP, right? The cooldown is still 20 to 8 seconds, but they got rid of the fact that you used to be able to lower the cooldown of Arcane Comet depending on what type of damage or what type of spell you hit the enemy champion with. What the hell's going on with my internet? Trash ass internet in the projects. But you know, they only let me use Optimum here. That shit is so degrading. But getting rid of that means that champions like Brand, champions like Lilia, champions like, I mean, you wouldn't take Arcane Comet on Lilia, but Brand, Zyra, these champions that have a lot of damage over time effects, they would kind of be able to get a lot more usefulness out of Arcane Comet than a lot of other champions, right? Who were more bursty in their nature, right? And because the champions who had a lot of damage over time effects, or, you know, they wanted to go for low cooldowns, or they naturally had low cooldowns, those champions could refresh Arcane Comet significantly, right? And so you could get like maybe 2, maybe 3 more Arcane Comets out than expected, right? I don't know what's happening. Unfortunate. My internet's ass. But now the damage is based on where they are when it hit, where you are when the arcane comet hits, right? So anywhere from 0 to 750 range, I'm pretty sure you get damage amplification. Obviously 0 would give you 0% damage amplification, and then you kind of got to do the math. Doesn't matter, kind of, not necessarily. What matters more is if you're able to hit it. And there is a mechanic similar to Hex Optics, if you saw my video on it, where while the missile of Arcane Comet is traveling, if you walk away or you walk further from the enemy champion that the Arcane Comet will be hitting, you have the chance to increase the damage, right? Even if you walk past 750 range, right? So let's say you hit a champion as Lux with the binding, you're, let's say, 250 units away from them, and then you flash to 750 range, because I believe flash is 500 units. Wow, before the Arcane Comet hits them, you will then get the full 100% damage amplification instead of the 33% that being 250 units away from them would have given you, right? That can be decent to deal a little bit more damage if needed, right? Or, you know, it just looks cool, right? You get the nice critical effect on Arcane Comet, right? Just pretty funny, right? But that can be used, especially early. Like, let's say your Lux champion walks into the middle of your E, right? Your E slows. You walk away farther from them, or you continuously walk away, and then you pop the E while it's traveling. You're still walking away. You're going to get a little bit more damage, right? Those are just things you have to think about when using Arcane Comet. So it's better. I found my internet finally works. So it's better when you're farther away as opposed to when you're closer, right? So before, Arcane Comet actually used to deal 30 to 130 damage. It had the same scaling, right? And then really the big part of it was the, what's it called? The cooldown reduction that you could get, because you could then throw out, you know, in a team fight, multiple Arcane Comets depending on how many spells you're able to throw out. But yeah, let's talk about Deathfire's Touch now. This is the big, I think this rune will also be extremely meta defining, not only for the top lane, but even for the jungle, kind of. I think we might get away from a lot of sorcery tree in the jungle, unless specifically some cases, right? But this will be meta defining for top lane. This will be meta defining for mid lane. This will be meta defining for bot lane. Well, I don't know about top lane, because a lot of champions there, they, you know, with phase rush being taken out of the game, you know, we're a lot of scaling champions that kind of needed phase rush to exist, they're kind of gonna be taken out, right? Which means we're gonna see a lot more bruisers. We're gonna see a lot more, maybe even ranged tops, right? So Deathfire Touch, it might make an appearance in the top lane. You know, we might get some mages up there. It's definitely gonna be super strong in the mid lane, and it's definitely gonna be decent in the bot lane, right? For not only supports, or for not only supports, but for some ADCs, right? So let's see what Deathfire Touch says. So it's whenever you damage a champion with an ability, you burn them for 1 to 10 based on level, plus 3% of your AP, or 8% of your bonus AD, and or as adaptive damage per second. And then after they burn for 3 seconds, the damage of the burn increases by 100% while they remain on fire. So the burn actually ticks every half a second. So every second you're getting, you know, half of the damage on them. And then you're going to get the other half of the damage after the full second, right? So it makes it a little better, because then you get like a little bit more. It's okay. It's a good thing. That's a good thing. It's not a bad thing, right? When looking at these numbers, you might think, these numbers are doo-doo, right? At level 1, you're getting 1 base damage. And then when you're level 1, when you start the game, you don't have any AP. So even this AP ratio is trash, right? But if you're a champion that's able to have them or have enemy champions burn for more than 3 seconds, that damage will be increased by 100% for any second after 3 seconds, right? Or for the next tick, which would be at the 3.5 seconds, right after you got them burning. Which means that that base damage is actually doubled, right? Now instead of it being 1 to 10 scaling based on level, now it's 2 to 20, that's good, that's great. Instead of it being a 3% AP ratio, it's a 6% AP ratio. Instead of it being an 8% bonus AD ratio, it's a 16% bonus AD ratio, right? And that's kind of what you're going for, right? When you look at Deathfire's touch. Can you burn the enemy champions for longer than 3 seconds? How long can you burn them for longer than 3 seconds? And how many enemy champions can you get burning at once for longer than 3 seconds, right? So the durations work like this. Single target spells, think Anivia E, think Victor Q, think, let's just go to the list, right? Think Nidalee Spear, Rumble Harpoon, T-Bow Toxic Shot. What? Aurelian Soul, actually, when you pop the circle, when you use the Q long enough and you pop that, whatever it's called, that's a single target spell. So it actually works on Aurelian Soul, making it really broken, right? Stuff like Malzahar E. Funnily enough, or not funny enough, kind of sad, Vel'Koz actually does not have a single target spell. You know, Jin Q, W, Ultimate, Smolder Q, Morgana Q, stuff like that, right? Those are going to be single target spells, which are going to give a 4-second duration burn of Deathfire touch on whoever you hit them with, right? Which means you're going to activate the longer burn time of Deathfire's touch. Right, then you have the area of effect, which is going to, you know, continuously burn them for 2 seconds, not bad. And then anything that's damage over time while they are on that is going to reapply the burn for 1 second, right? So how you got to think about this, or actually let me speak on how the refreshing works. So any application of Deathfire's touch can only refresh the burn up to the amount of the spell applied. I think that's the best way I can word it, right? So let's say you're applying a single target burn. Let's say you're Victor. You apply a single target burn, right? 4 seconds on the clock for the burn. But then you hit them with your laser. You're not going to be adding any burn to it, right? The burn time doesn't stack. It doesn't go from 4 seconds to 6 seconds. It also will not refresh that 4-second burn, right? So let's say, you know, you insta QE at the same time. You will only apply that 4-second burn because the area of effect burn will never cascade or overwrite the single target burn. And the only time that the area of effect burn can refresh a single target burn is if the single target burn is less than however much an area of effect burn will, you know, apply in terms of how long the Deathfire's touch thing will apply, right? So let's say you Victor Q, you apply the single target burn, and then it goes down to 1 second. When you hit that Victor E, it won't reapply the single target burn in 4 seconds. It'll just apply the area of effect burn and then increase that 1 second burn that was left from your old ability to a 2-second burn, right? So that's pretty much how the refresh thing works. Damage over time effects will never stop Deathfire touch from reapplying, right? So let's say your brand, you hit them with your Ablaze passive, and then whatever, they walk away. It will continuously refresh Deathfire's touch as long as the Ablaze passive is dealing damage, and then, you know, it'll go away once, you know, the Ablaze passive goes away, right? Pets also are counted, I'm pretty sure, as damage over time, right? I tested this on Yorick, right, which is pretty much all pets, right? So that's pretty good. That can be really, really strong. Single target spells, like I said, Victor Q, Yorick Q, Nasus Q, Udyr Q, all of these things apply Deathfire's touch, which is really, really strong. Another cool thing about Deathfire's touch is how it works with items, right? If you're not new to this game and you watch a lot of like high elo players, there was a build that was Blackfire Torch combined with Cosmic Drive, right? And the reason you bought this was because when you applied magic damage, while you had Cosmic Drive in your inventory, right, you gain 20%, you gain 20 flat bonus movement speed, right? And so the burn from Blackfire Torch on champions that did not have like any innate damage over time allowed for the Cosmic Drive passive to pretty much continuously refresh and give you a lot of movement speed, right? But now the way that Deathfire Torch actually works is the same as Blackfire Torch, or the way Deathfire Touch is this works the same as Blackfire Torch, sorry. And so now on some champions, if you do end up buying or if Cosmic Drive is a seriously strong item on your champion, having Deathfire's touch on that champion means that Cosmic Drive is a legitimate first item purchase on you if you're able to reapply Deathfire's touch at a consistent rate. Because then, you know, let's say you're able to apply a single target spell as Victor, right? Now you don't need to build Blackfire Torch in order to make Cosmic Drive like really work, right? And so this kind of allows a lot of champions to go a little bit more of a tankier build, right? Stuff like if you need the mana, you can go Rod of Ages, and then you can get Cosmic Drive, and now just with your Blackfire, with your Deathfire Touch Keystone, you now can be very like fast, due to being able to use Cosmic Drive in a way, right? And so I do think this is going to really lead to new builds and new ways to play, because not only does it proc Cosmic Drive, it also does things like keep you in combat, right? So an item like Riftmaker, which for each second in combat it gives you increased damage dealt, and then when that max stacks you get Omnivamp. Deathfire Touch keeps you in combat, allowing you to then kind of hit the enemy champion with one spell and then instantly proccing Riftmaker, right? That is a very broken interaction, because one of the ways that Riftmaker is kind of balanced for a lot of champion is the fact that it's very hard to really start the fight off with the Omnivamp, right? Let's say you're Mordekaiser, you know, you have to kind of get into a full-on fight with the enemy champion in order to proc Riftmaker. But if you take Deathfire's Touch, right? That's what it's called, Deathfire Touch. You can hit them with a Q, and then you'll have Riftmaker instantly procced if they do not decide to engage. And once it's procced, you can start running at you can start walking at the enemy champion, and now you're fighting with an extra 10% Omnivamp, you know, while both of you are at like 100% HP, right? And that really makes the fights, you know, that much more favorable to you. You also get the 8% increased damage, right? And interactions like that are extremely powerful. There were a few more items that actually work in this way. I do not like the way this looks. I'll probably list them there. I'll list them on the screen, just so that I don't waste y'all's time, right? So now I want to go into the damage portion of Deathfire Touch, right? I want to go a little bit more in depth. So, because, you know, you kind of have to compare the damage in order to, you know, see who's it really worth on. I'm probably going to have the list of champions, or the tier list that I made here on screen, right? So I want to, you know, compare it really to Airy, Comet, Electrocute, and First Strike, right? So Deathfire's touch, you see the numbers, not very high. Let's see somebody like Aurelian Soul, who used to take Arcane Comet, or who I believe now will take Deathfire's touch in the new season, right? So a big thing with Aurelian Soul is the fact that, you know, you could tap your Q and not only proc Scorch, but also proc Arcane Comet. Right, so you will also proc Deathfire's touch, but only as the damage over time. So, you know, at level 1, even if you have, you know, max damage with stuff like absolute focus, double adaptive, cut down, it's only gonna deal like 2 damage per burn tick. It's not that much, right? As opposed to Arcane Comet, if it lands, it might deal 15, you know, 20 damage. Not terrible, right? Or at least it's better than Deathfire's touch. But the big thing is, will Arcane Comet land every single time you use it? And if it doesn't have to be every single time, but, you know, any time that you need that damage to really take foot in the lane. I don't want to use words like abuse, right? You know, normalizing words like that is terrible. But to really, you know, cement your lead in the laning phase, if you can't hit Arcane Comet consistently, it's probably better for you to go Deathfire's touch or Airy. If you're not a champion that can also proc electrocute, and if, you know, you don't necessarily have a good time at using first strike, or you don't want to take first strike for whatever reason, right? Because you prefer the sorcery tree as opposed to the first strike tree, maybe because, you know, you want to have access to Gathering Storm, or you want to have access to like absolute focus or celerity or something like that, right? Yeah, and you don't want whatever's in the inspiration tree, or you don't even want to take the inspiration tree. You want to take the precision tree to get like double haste from this, and cut down, or presence of mind, or whatever, right? I forgot what I was talking, right? So if you can't hit confirm Arcane Comet, it's not going to be as good, right? So if you're just Oriana, you know, throwing your Q out and then they can dodge Arcane Comet, it's going to be better to either take Airy or Deathfire's touch. And so, you know, this, right, if you're like squishy mage, not even squishy mage, if you're non-mobility mage versus non-mobility mage, right, Victor versus Xerath, you can land your Arcane Comet consistently as Xerath, right? You press W on the Victor and you're gonna land your Comet. As opposed to Victor, if he lasers you, you can walk out of the Comet even without boots as Xerath, right? Cool stuff like that. And then we go to Airy and Deathfire's touch, right? So Airy's damage is relatively low, right? I also don't want to normalize the word poor, right? I hate the fact that people normalized vegan as something negative. People say illegal. Like, what the hell is wrong with these people? Dead ass. That shit is mad. I'm glad that at the very least, right, we do sometimes hear that from, you know, like pro level broadcast, which is extremely disgusting. But you know, aside from their you know, very trash takes on the game, but yeah, that shit is so disappointing. It's very disgusting. Because sometimes I watch the pro broadcast, or mostly I watch the pro broadcast, you know, just to see what's going on in the pro plays. But yeah, let's get back to the topic, right? So summon Airy versus Deathfire's Deathfire touch. So Airy, the way it works, you hit someone, it takes 2 seconds before the summon Airy comes back to you. You can speed it up, not only by getting levels, right? If we go to the summon Airy thing, it tells you how long it takes. Right, blah blah blah. Airy lingers on the target for 2 seconds before flying back to the user, and then it accelerates. I don't know why. Yeah, it tells you over here, right? It gradually speeds up. I forgot where it says. Somewhere here, but whatever. It gradually speeds up. I think over here it tells you that the thing increases. Somewhere in this thing it tells you that it increases based on level, how fast the Airy comes to you, right? And so if you're someone who does not have the ability to reapply Deathfire's touch rather consistently in a matchup, right, and your matchup kind of depends on you auto attacking a lot, right, staying into range, because when you're auto attacking, that means you're pretty much as close as possible to deal max damage, which means that summon area is going to come quicker to you, right, which means you're going to maybe be able to apply an extra area, or, you know, 2 areas or 3 areas in a fight, right? Maybe at max 2, especially in the early levels, right? As opposed to, let's say you're Orianna, right? You're going to be auto attacking a lot. You're going to be throwing your Q as much as possible, but your Q is very high cooldown and it's an area of effect. So in a trade, you're going to be throwing off more autos, and more than likely you're going to get area back while you're trading, as opposed to getting your Q back, right? For Deathfire's touch. So you really got to, it's another thing where you have to think, right, how early game dominant do I want to be, right? Do I need that extra damage from Aerie on this champion that I have to wait to scale in order to make Deathfire's touch be actually good? Or can I sacrifice the early game damage with Aerie in order to, you know, kind of scale with Deathfire's touch, even if it's not extremely useful in the early game, right? That's kind of that. Electrocute, pretty much if you want to deal as much single target damage and you somewhat benefit from the domination tree, right? If you're someone who can actively proc sudden impact, if you're someone who can actively proc cheap shot in your, what's it called, in your combos, you like Sixth Sense, I think this is extremely powerful. Sixth Sense, and then whatever you want, one of these, and then you want to go like Scorch as well, while also getting like Mana Flow Band and your secondary tree. You go Electrocute. It's still the highest damage single target spell in the early game if you're able to proc Electrocute very early, right? The only you need, because Deathfire Touch deals like 2 damage in the early game, right, per tick. So for the first 3 ticks, you're going to deal like 12 damage if you're able to burn somebody for 3 seconds, right? This is where you take into account somebody like Aurelion Sol. You know, if somebody wants to really fight you to the death for as long as possible, somebody like Aurelion Sol is going to be able to proc Deathfire's touch for like maybe 10 seconds in the early game, right? So if we're counting 10 seconds, for the first 3 seconds you're dealing 12 damage, and then after the 3rd second it's dealing double damage, so it'll deal 3, it'll deal 100% more damage, so maybe it'll even deal 4, right? So for those 7 seconds you're gonna get 14 applications of damage, because it's every half a second that the damage is applied. So 14 times 4, we're talking 40, 24, 64, plus the 12 damage, so for a total of 76 damage. That's going to deal more than Electrocute. But, right, that's in certain situations. But Aurelion Sol was a champion who has access to those certain situations, right? So you really got to think of champions like that, right? Something like Malzahar, you throw your E on them. Not only is it single target, but it's also dot damage. So I don't necessarily know how that works. I actually want to go to Malzahar's E while we're here, right? It's dot damage. It's not the best, but it will apply it for 5 seconds at the very least, even though it is single target. But yeah, somebody like Malzahar can have that be applied to you for 5 seconds, which, you know, it's probably not as much as Electrocute, but Electrocute also has a 20-second cooldown, right? So if you're fighting non-stop, right, a champion like Malzahar, who his E is on a 11 seconds, right, you're going to be able to get it off twice before the Electrocute proc comes back up, which means that you're able to, you know, probably out-damage Electrocute every single time, especially if you have some type of ability haste from like your runes or you know, depending on AP and stuff like that, right? So, or at least the damage is going to be even enough to where it's not a problem of scaling, right? So that's kind of how you have to think about Deathfire's touch. The scaling isn't low, it's not bad, it's just how often can you apply it, right? And then you also got to think when you're going into the mid game, what's your build? Are you going to be building items that give you haste, or are you a champion that naturally gets very low cooldowns? Somebody like Malzahar, that Malefic Vision is going down to 7 seconds. And then your Q is on a static 6-second cooldown, which is relatively low, right? And your Void Swarm, also pretty low cooldown, right? So things like that really take into effect. And the fact that somebody like Malzahar ends up getting Blackfire Torch, an item that gives you a lot of haste, right? You might get something like Horizon Focus, or you might get something like Crypt Bloom as your second item, giving you even more haste, allowing you to multiply your procs of Deathfire Touch, right, onto multiple enemy champions. You do have to take into account that the burn only increases, right, on that champion after 3 seconds. So it's not like you had a burn on a champion already ticking past 3 seconds, and then you apply a burn onto a different champion, and because you had that burn on that first champion who already had it on for 3 seconds, your next application on a different champion is also going to burn for 100% more. I'm pretty sure it only calculates the burn per champion, right? So it's not like some other stuff. I don't know, whatever. Had to mention that, right? So I want to talk about some champions, right? There are also some other items. I think I already had that on screen, right? Let's talk about some champions. So Echoes of Helia actually works really well with Deathfire's Touch. So a champion like Nidalee gets, if you do end up going that Echoes of Helia build, or if you're a champion that likes getting Echoes of Helia, or you like getting stuff like Diadem of Songs, or you're playing with a champion that likes using Deathfire's Touch, and you're a champion that rushes Diadem of Songs, this is another application of this item, of making those items extra strong, right? Because it's extra damage, especially on a champion like Nidalee, who, if you hit a Q, you're gonna have 4 seconds of that damage. And because Echoes of Helia has its pre-mitigation damage, it's going to add a little bit more healing into that build, as opposed to something like Dark Harvest, or as opposed to something like Electric Q and stuff like that, right? So I think it can be good. We could put Nidalee in the depends category, right? Because it is what it is, right? Because you might still want to go electrocute in some matches and blah blah blah, right? But for items like Echoes of Helia, let's say you have a brand APC, and they have Deathfire's Touch, even though they're already a champion that had ways to stay in combat, right? So now let's go somebody like, let's say, Swain Bottom, right? He's not someone who necessarily buys Blackfire Torch too much. They might get a Leandries early, they might not. They might go for like a Rylai's early, or a pen item early, and things like that. Maybe a tank item, I don't know, right? But you're a champion like who's someone like Sona support, or Senna support, right? Let's say Diadem of Songs, like even that item in itself might become one of the strongest support items coming this new season, right? If you're able to stack it and make it into Diadem of Songs as early as possible, you're gonna be able to not only get more healing out, because now Deathfire's touching the game, and a lot of champions who didn't have access to damage over time, or the ability to stay in combat, now that's in the game, right? Meaning that's kind of how Diadem of Songs work, right? If you heal your teammate, you're going to continuously heal your teammates if they stay in combat. And so not only does this work as, in combination with a teammate, but this also works against enemy champions that are now going to be building or taking Deathfire's Touch as a keystone, making that item that much stronger, right? So Diadem of Songs can end up becoming a very good counter to Deathfire's Touch, to Blackfire Torch. It already was a counter to Blackfire Torch and like Leandries. So there's that. What else? It's also really good at applying Eclipse, right? So this is why I have some champions on the Depends category, right? So Depends for me, I also had Zillion here just because, you know, they don't want to leave Zillion. You know, care about the elderly. Please, sorry for hitting my mic if that bothered you. All right, somebody like Fiddlesticks, let's take Jungle Fiddlesticks into the account, right? You have either Dark Harvest, First Strike, or now you have Deathfire's Touch, right? So First Strike, obviously amazing to give you as much gold back because you deal a ton of damage in team fights, right? Especially if you get a good R off in those 2.5 or 3 seconds that you get with First Strike, you're able to deal a ton of damage, right? Meaning that, you know, you get a lot of gold back and makes it, you know, a lot very worth because the amount of gold that you get as a jungler and the items that you want to really carry games, right? All depends on your gold. So it makes it good. But Deathfire's Touch on a champion like Fiddlesticks, who has, I don't know if it might be like Malzahar, where your W isn't, your Q is 100% a spell damage, which means it's a single target spell, but your W, it's an area dot damage. Interesting. I don't know what this means. I think it would choose the dot thing, right? And then your Crowstorm also has AoE or dot damage, and then this is area damage, right? So you can 100% take Deathfire's Touch. I don't know, as a jungler, would it be better than First Strike? Probably not. But as a mid laner, right, Deathfire's Touch is probably the correct choice. And then we have stuff like Mordekaiser, right? This is where things like getting Riftmaker first or getting Cosmic Drive first can matter. And then especially with a lot of build diversity going into, or that we've seen, right? A lot of Mordekaisers have been going Hexplate or Experimental Hexplate because they want the attack speed, because they want the movement speed and the ultimate haste. You know, Deathfire's Touch might just be better than Conqueror because, you know, you're not necessarily going a very big, what's it called? A very big like AP build, right? If you're not getting something like Death Cap in your build, which somebody like Mordekaiser, you're not gonna get that, right? That is not necessarily a part of your build. You're going Bruiser. You might even get some tank items. So getting something like Death Cap is not the best thing on this champion in 90% of the occasions, right? I don't know too many Mordekaiser builds, but I'm pretty sure Death Cap is usually not one of them, right? So getting Deathfire's Touch as opposed to the AP that you would get, right? The 40, 50 AP that you would get from Conquer is probably going to give you more damage, right? A max of 50 AP, right? 51 AP. It's probably going to give you more damage, especially since you not only have the ability to apply it to so many champions, but because it works in tandem with a lot of your items, especially early on, giving you new build paths like Riftmaker first, Cosmic Drive first. It's going to be pretty game changing for a champion like Mordekaiser. Right, Kennen, I believe, is getting some changes to like ADC oriented or like crit oriented at the very least. So, but this is kind of like, you used to take Airy or Comet. Now you have Deathfire's Touch. You have single target spells. Just if you're able to land your spells, Deathfire Touch is probably better. In a team fight, hitting your ultimate, since I'm pretty sure it's, I don't know if it's AoE persistent damage. It might be single, yeah, it's AoE dot damage. That's kind of unfortunate. But stuff like your W is single target damage. So when you're pressing your ultimate into W, you're hitting multiple people, you're gonna get like decent damage out of your burn, right? And also, holy moly, you know what? I didn't even think about it. But Blackfire Torch with Deathfire's Touch allows you to just get more AP. But it worked like that anyways. But yeah, stuff like that. Maybe Deathfire's Touch is going to be better than Kennen. I'm not a Kennen player. I don't play Kennen. Look for the Kennen players to really see what they're building if you're a Kennen player. Pantheon, right? This is where, you know, if you're going for, or if you're in a matchup where you can't necessarily engage until you have solidified a strong HP lead, stuff like Deathfire Touch can really help you, because your W is a single target spell. You're someone who can consistently keep Deathfire's Touch procced, especially in the top lane, right? When you're in a 1v1, because you have such, like, you have really good spells. W is single target, your Q is area of effect, and your E is dot damage, right? What the hell is wrong with me? And so it also works with cool, what's it called? Persistent damage and area damage with the slam, right? So it also works at proccing items like Eclipse and stuff like Black Cleaver, right? So usually, in order to proc Black Cleaver on Pantheon, you have to, you know, use your entire combo, and then if they fight, you obviously have Black Cleaver stacked for the next all-in combo, right? But now it's kind of the same as Riftmaker, where if you rush Black Cleaver and you have Deathfire's Touch, 1Q will apply pretty much all five. It will apply all 5 stacks of a Black Cleaver, which means that if you ever hit them with a Q, you just wait for your Deathfire Touch to kind of like hit them with 2 procs. You go on with your W, and now they're fully Black Cleavered, right? And which means your next Q and every ability auto attack after that, you're getting full armor penned damage off of them, or at least from your Black Cleaver, right? Very, very disgusting. Very, very important. Kind of the same thing with Yorick, right? Depending on the matchup. So Yorick, Gangplank, and Jace really depends on the matchup, right? If you're going against a ranged champion, which you're not going to get any value out of Grasp, at least for something like Yorick, right? Your pets not only continuously apply the Deathfire's Touch, but it does apply it as a dot damage thing. It's okay, but your Q applies single target, your E applies area of effect. You have a really easy time at applying it. It's pretty good, right? Something like Gangplank and Jace, not only is the sorcery tree probably one of their best trees, but it is pretty, it's going to be very strong. They scale very hard, but more specifically, if they don't need Grasp for the matchup, or if it's a matchup where you take First Strike, right? It really depends. Do you value the gold and the inspiration tree over the sorcery tree and the damage from Blackfire Touch? Because these champions do have very easy times at applying it, not only to multiple people, but for a relatively long time, right? It's, you know, Gangplank barrels, that's very easy AoE application. Gangplank Q, if you're just shooting somebody, especially in the early game, right? That's pretty much really where it matters, because in the later parts, they do become like very bursty, very high damage champions, very one-shotty champions. And so like it's really more of an early game rune. Will you get more value out of Deathfire's Touch in the early game than you will from something like Grasp or something like First Strike, right? I don't know. You have to ask them, right? Something like Vladimir, you're in the depends, because depending on the matchup, like I said, I don't know if I went over this earlier, it's going to be very hard for a lot of these champions to proc Storm Surge now, right? You have to deal 25% of the enemy team's health, right? So something like Talia, something like Cassiopeia, something like Syndra. Syndra probably doesn't have that hard of a time. But yeah, somebody like Veigar. Veigar going into the later of the game, proccing Storm Surge is going to be incredibly easy. That's really good. But this also does mean that for like the first 7 levels of the game, you're playing without a Keystone. You're basically playing with, what's this thing called? With Summoner's Spellbook, right? Do you need a Keystone? If you don't, you can obviously go Storm Raider Surge. But if you do need a Keystone, and it's not like Deathfire's Touch does not scale massively on some of these champions, especially since you can get stuff like not only does this give you access to cosmic drives without the need of getting Leandries or Blackfire Torch, this gives you like just an extra damage spell, which, you know, if you go a haste build, you're going to not only be able to apply it massively in AoE or to multiple people, you're going to be able to consistently apply it, right? And then we have champions like Mel, Ari, right? It just depends, because some of their spells, right? Something like Ari, in matchups where you would take Airy, why wouldn't you just take Deathfire's Touch? Because Ari, her W is it's a single target spell, which means you're going to, especially since the W's don't go out all at once, they go out like little by little, you can get like 5 seconds of application of Deathfire's Touch at level 1 from your Foxfire, which is pretty massive, right? And then your E is also single target. I think this is also its area of damage. Right, the ultimate, you have a very easy time at applying it to multiple enemy champions. So, you know, champions like this, you have to really think, how easy is it to really apply it to a lot of enemy champions, and how long can you apply it, right? So somebody like Lysandra, I don't know, maybe Arcane Comet is probably better on Lysandra, but the fact that, you know, you're a champion that kind of gets very close to the enemy team, right? Maybe something like First Strike or Electrocute is probably better on Lysandra. I don't know. But yeah, things like that you really got to think about. So that's it from me. Thank you for watching. I hope I gave you as much information as you needed to really, you know, make your choice in this new season. I hope that this helped. I hope that you know, you are able to just kind of go into the new season and kind of, you know, take over with this knowledge, right? Maybe you're able to figure something out that, you know, kind of pushes you over the rest of the player base in order to, you know, get to a higher rank than you were before, right? I'd love to see that. I'd love to hear about it, right? So thank you for watching. Love y'all. Have a great day, right? And I'll see you on the next one. We're gonna be talking about some other new stuff in the new season. Peace.